Hey, good morning. This is the second part of the meal induction video. We're going to go into evaluations now. So the first step is the monitoring, which is a process that happens throughout the lifetime of the project. Evaluation is something that happens either at midterm or endline. It's a moment we stop to look and take account of what has happened, what we've looked at, what the information we've collected, and have a deeper look into that and produce some knowledge with it, so we can have some later learning. So evaluation for us is based on the the OECD DAC criteria. The DAC criteria has between 5 or 8, depending if you're looking at humanitarian or development criteria. And the criteria, the first one of the most important ones, is relevance. Relevance is if the assistance was actually needed. Was it relevant for the population that we're giving it to? And that goes hand in hand with consultation, because if we don't talk to the populations, we don't understand what they actually need. If we don't measure properly, if we're not driven by evidence on the needs of the community, then the relevance won't be there. That's why it's a critical step there. The second one is effectiveness, directly relating to our capacity to reach our objectives. If we wanted to distribute 1,000 sealing off kits for shelter, did we manage to do that? Did we manage to get to the locations we should have? Were the sealing off kits enough to prevent families from having to move to a different shelter or suffer conditions from the winter? Effectiveness is directly related to our objectives. Efficiency is much harder to measure because it requires to look at an input-output ratio. For example, we took $10,000 to distribute 1,000 sealing off kits. So then we have a relationship between how much each kit costed to be distributed in the field. We can compare between locations. For example, in a context with a high security risk, it might be much more costly to deliver the kits, having for example, a $20 per kit cost, whereas in locations with much better market access and security context, it might be much less, around 15 or 10. So this requires a bit of looking at the finances of the project and the direct relationship to the aid given. And when conducting an external evaluation, this is a key point to have a conversation with the PMs and project managers and the finance managers. So this information is readily available and can be directly associated in time. Impact is also quite hard to measure in this context, particularly for humanitarian, because it's hard to have counterfactual. It's hard to assign or attribute the impact that we measure. For example, the difference between baseline and endline, an improvement in the drop in negative coping strategies or increase in income. It's quite hard to measure because there's nothing we're comparing this group to. It could be that the conditions in the context changed, and in general, everybody in Iraq, for example, increased their income. So it's very hard to see that impact, that increase in income, is attributed to us instead of the economy. And finally, we have sustainability, which is a core concept associated to who is going to take charge of the project when we leave, or who will, or how the project will continue itself. Is it perpetual by itself? A governmental agency will take it. Is it in line also? And then we jump to the other criteria. Is it in line with the government plans for the region and things like that? So in DRC Iraq, evaluations follow a clear guidelines, which is available here. Represent this link. And the guidelines show who's responsible for measuring what, how long we should start the process with. And it's key to start 6 months before the end of the grant, so we have enough time to circulate the TORs with the PMs and reach out to them. There's a detail of the process, which involves basically collecting all the information available for the grant before it happens, and before the end of the grant happens, sorry. And to schedule data collection, hopefully well before the grant ends, so their teams are actually implementing, and the consultant, if it's an external evaluation, or our team, can actually see the implementing teams working. as well as coordinating with the PMs for data collection. We also need to coordinate with them to sharing their documentation, SOPs, or any general process they follow that the consultant or ourselves have to be aware of and compare to. After the collection is ready, the consultant or our own team, if it's internal, will have to produce a report which is shared with the PMs and area managers for review, and there's a discussion. And after that, a set of recommendations. A set of recommendations follow the DRC format, which outlines the recommendation itself, the comment generated, accepted or rejected, or partially accepted, and the actions and the person liable for those actions and when. Here you have some examples of the evaluations. And here is an example of a TOR. By pressing the links below, you can directly go to them. And that's evaluations. Evaluations are directly related to the learning step. And we'll see that, for example, an evaluation in 2019 led us to implement the information management team, which is helping a lot with the monitoring process and accountability process. By properly having a tracking of each individual beneficiary under protection activities, under shelter activities, and livelihood activities.